Hi, my name is Daryl. I'm 16 years old and I live with my parents and 3 siblings. I'm the firstborn. When I was much younger, our house used to be such a paradise. We would all play and laugh. There was so much love around. But all that changed 5 years ago when my mum had my younger brother. Apparently they weren't supposed to have any more children. My brother was a mistake. My father was so upset with my mum for letting it happen. "Why were you so careless?" he raged. "You could have used protection." She quit back. From then on, things were never the same. All through my mum's pregnancy with my brother Joe, my house was a war zone. I was so scared any time both of them were at home together. I would stay in the room and never dare come out until one of them was out. They would fight and throw hurtful words at each other. I was torn. They were beginning to show me and my other siblings less and less attention. Before all of this, whenever Dad came home from work, he would run to my mum and us and give us huge hugs and kisses. Now, he came back and stormed into his room without so much as a glance at us. It was painful watching this happen between my parents. And the sad part was, they didn't seem to care what effect it had on us. It seemed like all the love they had for us had just disappeared. My sisters, Susie and Jackie, cried almost every minute watching this happen. And as their big brother, I was forced to try to console them and assure them that everything was going to be all right, even though I didn't know that myself. Things didn't get better. My parents grew further and further apart, and with that came less and less attention from any of them. My sisters and I were beginning to feel unwanted and unloved. Rage poured out of my dad any time he heard either of my sisters crying, and the terror that showed in their eyes as they looked at this man they once knew as Dad said it all. It all came to a head when Joe was 4. I knew that having Joe was the reason for all that happened in my family in the last few years, but I didn't expect my dad to be so cruel. Dad was watching the television one day, and 4-year-old Joe was walking around the house. He was playing with a toy water gun that my uncle had bought him for his last birthday. My parents rarely bought him anything. In fact, they'd forgotten all our last birthdays, including Joe's. I could tell that my dad was fine as long as Joe didn't disturb him, and I hope for poor Joe's sake that he didn't. What did he know? He was only a child. Unfortunately for Joe, as he was playing with his water gun, he sprayed too much water on the water-sensitive television, and it blew up. My heart pounded for my brother. I knew my dad would not let him get away without hurting him. I watched in horror as my dad got up from the couch in a rage and snatched my poor brother by the arm, dragging him out. Joe was pleading and begging, saying he was sorry, and tears formed in his eyes as I heard the screaming. Soon after, my dad returned, sweating. Behind him was Joe, limping. I was mad. That did it. I stormed out of the living room and headed straight for the telephone. I was going to call the police on my dad. But then I stopped. I thought about what that would do to my sisters Jackie and Susie. They were already so emotionally drained. This would only cause them more problems. Yes, my dad had turned into a horrible man, but they would never forgive me for calling the police on him. I put down the telephone, still in a rage, and then an idea hit me. We would run away. I would take all 3 of my siblings and run away. That night, I stayed up until after my parents had gone to sleep. When I was sure no one would wake, I tiptoed into my sister's room. "Wake up, Susie and Jackie. We're running away tonight," I said as I tapped them awake. "Where are we going, Daryl?" they said, still half asleep, rubbing their eyes. "I don't know yet. Now come on." I was carrying my sleeping brother Joe in my hands. We shared one room, while the girls shared another. We packed only a few essential things in one bag that Jackie carried on her shoulder, and with a deep breath, I led them as we snuck out of the house. "Come on," I said to them. When we got out of the house, my heart and my mind were racing. If we went to our uncle's house, our parents would be able to bring us back, and then we'd all be in more trouble than we'd ever been before, including poor Joe. That wasn't an option. My heart raced as we ran into the night, realizing what we were doing, but it had to be done. As we ran, all of a sudden, I remembered there was an orphanage somewhere not too far away. We saw it every day on the way to school. "Follow me!" I yelled to my sisters as I walked in the direction of the orphanage. I knocked on the door so hard as soon as we reached it. "Please, help us!" I screamed, banged as hard as I could. By now, Joe was awake. "It's all right, little brother," I said, as I patted him back to sleep. "You're going to be okay." A few moments later, the door opened, and Mrs. Briggs was shocked to see me and my siblings standing outside. "Darryl," she gasped, "what are you doing here?" Mrs. Briggs was my mother's good friend. They'd gone to the same college together. She'd known us since we were toddlers. We went in, and I told Mrs. Briggs all that had happened in the last few years, especially all that had happened that day. I showed her the cuts on Joe's body. She wept and said that she can't believe what she's hearing about my mother. She suggested to talk to her to help us find a solution. I told Mrs. Briggs that she was welcome to try, but only in a few days. I wanted to make sure they're less violent by then. It's what she did. By the time Mrs. Briggs told my mum all I had said and how we felt, she broke down crying. "I'm so sorry, kids," she apologised as she wept. "Your dad is sorry too. It's because you insisted you didn't want to see him yet that he isn't here, Darryl. Losing you all made us finally realise that you're the most important thing we've ever had in our lives. We're so sorry we missed it. Would you ever find it in your hearts to forgive us?" Tears formed in both my eyes and my sister's as we heard these words. Why did they have to wait so long before they realised it? The hurt was too much to bear. "We'll think about it," I spoke up finally. "Fair enough," my mother said with a faint smile. "Take all the time you need." A couple of days later, my dad and mum came to the orphanage together, smiling, hand in hand, and the first thing my dad did was pick up Joe and kiss him. Before he even apologised, I let out a huge sigh of relief and smiled. I could feel my sisters do the same. We left with them for the house again, and from then on, love was back in the house, and Joe was never treated like he wasn't wanted again.